Oh, good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much for being here today. My name's Chris. Welcome to PancakesCon. Before we start, I've been watching some of the content today. There are some really, really cool people here who are not only presenting, but organizing this whole thing. And I want to say how grateful I am for the opportunity to be here. And thank you so much to Leslie and to everyone who decided that I was going to be a good choice for this. I'm going to try really hard not to let you down. Today, we're going to talk about two really cool things. One is the big Gmail bug from last June. The other is Kenpo karate. Those things together will make sense as we move along. So let's start. Let's start by talking about something that happened last summer. It all starts with email and something called BIMI, which stands for Brand Indicators for Message Identification. This is not something that was spoken in my house before last May 31st. You've probably never heard of this. It's a logo. It's a logo that's presented in your mail client on behalf of the mail client, right? So if you send a piece of correspondence to someone, the mail client sort of independently presents a logo of your brand. And this is an internet standard that's run by the BIMI working group, which is where this screenshot comes from. And without getting into all the gritty details of how this works, you meet some technical requirements, including DMARC, and a mail client shows your brand logo automatically, and it's kind of cool. And basically, not only am I telling you this message is from me, in my display name, but the logo says so because there's some security infrastructure supporting the display of the logo, and that's well intended, but it's not very intuitive, right? And so we'll get into that in a minute. This is the BIMI support matrix as of last June. You can see in the left-hand side here, there's some pretty significant players in email that support this brand display. This matrix has not materially changed since last June. We'll probably get into why in just a minute. But so May 3rd, to that earlier point about how intuitive it is for a user to understand what BIMI is doing for them. After 2 years of supporting these brand logos in Gmail, Google is rolling out this huge new feature, the blue check mark, the ubiquitous blue check mark of social authenticity, right? Now for email. And jokes aside, right? This is to help identify messages from legit senders. This is intended to give every Gmail user some real confidence that their email is really from who they think it's from. And in practice, it looks like this. You see there's a little blue check, and you hover over it, and you get this assertion of safety from Google. And to be clear, the BIMI standard is the brand logo that you see in this left-hand sort of gutter here. It's not the blue check mark. The blue check mark is a platform independent choice, and well-intended, I think you might argue. So then May 30th, a few weeks after that announcement, 4:53 p.m., I will never forget it. I think important background here is that in my decades of working in InfoSec, I have analyzed probably thousands of phishing emails, and this looks an awful lot like one. It's more interesting, I'm getting excited just talking about it, but it's more interesting because it landed in my inbox, which if you're a Gmail user, that's fairly unusual, right? I mean, Gmail is usually pretty good at detecting spam. So there's a quick link in your Gmail to sort of quickly get the lay of the land and show not necessarily the full original content of the message, but at least show some snippets, some highlights from the headers. And there's some weird stuff going on here. I mean, if we look at the message ID, which is kind of where the message all starts, it's from some random virtual server. We see Zuckmail here. That's a Facebook artifact. There's an SPF pass, and that's an IPv6 address of a Microsoft IP. There's a DKIM pass from some rando O365 tenant. Even the from address is just really strange. I don't have a lot of time in that moment to really dive in, but so far there's some pretty red flags here. But it's getting on 5 o'clock that night, and I wanted to do something with this, but I had to go to karate. And here I am. This is actually me on the left. I'm here with one of my very favorite training partners, and we're roundhouse kicking each other in the abdomen, and that was the drill that night to sort of get used to what it feels like when you get hit, which is a really, really important part of self-defense. But I'm off to class. As much as I want to work on this message, I'm off to class because I have this self-discipline, right? I needed to go. I always need to go, but you can see here I'm wearing this belt. This is called a candidate belt, and it's kind of black and white, which means I'm in the process of testing for my black belt, which is kind of a number of months of training and testing in various forms. And here's a better look at that belt. It's such a cool ritual we have. You wear this belt for the months leading up to your black belt exam, and then you sign your name on it and you turn it in. You can see there are other names on that belt. Others have worn that same belt during their process, and I happen to know some of those people, which gives you this just really cool connection with them forever. That night was actually 6 years to the exact day that I began training, which was really weird and coincidental, but awesome. This is a kind of a blurry photo from our graduation night, but I'm there in the back, the tall person. That's my daughter next to me with her hands to her face. She's crying. This was a top proud dad moment for sure. My daughter's been through this process with me the whole way. She started training when she was 4. She's crying. She's crying because we had been through an awful lot that year. We start training in earnest for this process really all year. Our graduation was in December, but we really hit it hard starting in probably March. Our house was being renovated that year. We couldn't live in it. We lived in an RV for 6 months in our yard, which was an incredible test in itself without trying to prepare for a black belt exam. And as you can see here, we have a karate mat we brought out and just found a spot for it wherever we could. Another room where we did that too. My daughter's here running some forms. Just move some building materials aside and make some space, and you do what you have to do. We did a lot of trail running too. There was a running requirement for the test. It was like 3 miles or 30 minutes, and we took it much further than that. We were running as much as an hour out in the woods, just trying to build up the endurance we needed for this process. Had such a great time with this. It's kind of amazing how the universe works, but right in the middle of our testing cycle, we met the cast of Karate Kid, the original movie, at Rhode Island Comic-Con, and you can see them all here, and there's my family in the middle, and here we met Ralph Macchio, which who was Daniel from the movie, and he's a really gracious person. And but William Zabka, who plays Johnny, this was so special. When he learned, we had I don't know how much, we had a lot of time to talk with him that day, and when he learned my daughter was testing for black belt, he just absolutely lit up. He's a martial artist himself, and they really connected that day. And I have so many photos of this, but it was really unreal, and just what a really cool sort of asterisk on the whole process to have met all these folks. And so bringing it back to this email, this crazy email I get. It was May 30th, right? I went to class, and I came home that night, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I checked my email as a part of the process of building this presentation. And by 8 o'clock that next morning, I had submitted a bug to Google using their bug reporting platform, which I had never done, but I just let that thing fly. At this point, I was fairly confident in what I had found, and I thought this was a really big deal. I mean, this looked very, very dangerous to me. So by 5 o'clock that same day, Google responds, and they do not agree. They mark this as intended behavior. They're not tracking it as a bug, and I lose my mind. I thought I was right, and I have no idea what to do now. You know, the big machine has told me that I'm wrong, and you know, it feels wrong, but in another life, I don't know, for me, this probably would have been the end of it, you know, so what? Who cares? And so as it turns out, this isn't another life. I do care. So it's time to fight. And as you can see here, by 9 o'clock that night, I'd figured something out, and that I was going to take this to Twitter. I didn't know what else to do. So I sent this off. I go to sleep. I wake up, and this tweet had exploded. There were 100,000 views that morning, hundreds of retweets. It was completely insane. And even seeing that with over 2 decades of experience in this line of work, I am still not confident that I'm right and that Google has got this wrong. And so that's okay. I'm going to make another shot at this. So I compose a reply to Google, and I cite this very tweet, and I reference the conversation that started, and I let them have it. I let them know that something appears to be going on. This is a bug. It's harmful, and you need to fix it. And it's one of those things that you write with this incredible conviction. This doesn't happen to me very often, but you're almost shaking when you write it because you're so assured in what you are trying to communicate, and that is so rare. And here we go. The next day, June 1st, Google changes its mind. They changed this to priority 1, severity 1. In a little over 24 hours, this has gone from intended behavior to the most important thing they should be working on. That's crazy. The next few days were completely insane. This was posted on Friday night on Forbes. I didn't see this until Saturday morning. I was having coffee. My LinkedIn was going crazy. I had no idea why, and it's because people in other countries were discussing this story and tagging me. I had no idea what was happening. And then my wife immediately recognizes the totality of what's going on, and she does the greatest thing ever. She knows what this is. She could tell what was happening, and she reaches out to our local media outlets. And that morning, I'm in a TV station, and they're airing our story all weekend long. And this screenshot is so dorky, but it's kind of unreal. Then I was in Apple News, on every iOS device on the planet. And then it was everywhere. Newspapers, public radio. I was doing podcasts. I was in the biggest tech publications on earth. I don't even speak some of these languages, but I know everyone is getting the message about this bug. Everyone is understanding this vulnerability and how to protect themselves. And this feels awesome. This is the BIMI standards group we talked about before. They were compelled to reply to this in some way. You can see from the screen here, they never write about anything. And they composed this statement, and the short of it is, yeah, our stuff's working properly, and this is really highlighting a well-known problem with SPF, which we're going to get into for sure. But I mean, all this time, there's this thing that a lot of people knew, and there was no catalyst for changing anything. Well, now maybe this is it. We'll find out. The IETF weighs in. Now, this is the Internet Engineering Task Force. This is the standards organization for the entire internet. This has their attention. It's completely crazy. I wanted to post the entire message headers here, but this is an easier way to discuss this message. So this is in the spirit of the All Valley tournament from Karate Kid, but I'll try to not make a mess of this. So our message starts from this virtual server infrastructure, from that random Office 365 tenant, and it does this. It starts over here and moves to O365 because you're not going to send from your attacker infrastructure directly to Gmail. You'll sort of really quickly reveal yourself and get blocked pretty efficiently. But more importantly, I think the attacker knew that Office 365 would forward messages with a spoofed envelope. In this case, that crazy from address that we saw before. There's also some additional packing in the headers. There was a return path value. There was another weirdo UPS email address. Just additional insurance to sort of game spam detection algorithms. Then we have this Facebook artifact when we talked about that before. Now the message goes through Facebook. I mean, does it really though? I mean, this was a really confusing part of this. So these artifacts here, you see these in correspondence from Facebook. No doubt about it. They're formatted properly. This is this ex Facebook value. This is a Facebook Singapore IPv6 address. I mean, that is strange. And that doesn't make any sense because our virtual server infrastructure is not that. It's a different IP that, depending on who you ask, maybe it originates in Canada. We're not really sure about that. But it's confusing because in a lot of phishing email research, folks will say that the attackers don't usually manipulate the mail user agent. I mean, in my experience, sometimes they do. But one thing's for sure, Facebook has had DMARC for a very long time. Should mention that too. DMARC leaves very predictable traces in email headers. There are no Facebook DMARC artifacts in my message. There's no evidence of a Facebook mail exchanger in my headers, and so I'm not 100% on this, but I think this is tradecraft. I think this may actually have something to do with maybe the actual source of the message. Who knows? But that was a really tough detail to navigate because at first this just looked like a further complication in delivery. UPS. Okay, so this is an enormous detail. They had a shared Microsoft IP in their SPF record, and this permitted anyone in the office farm to send email on their behalf. And I think many of us who work in infrastructure know how consequential shared IPs are, right? So I think 3 main points here. I think the attacker knew that Office 365 was a soft spot. It knew Office would send that message down the road no matter what, because this is what the attacker does for a living. They had certainly done this before. I think the attacker knew that UPS had a weak SPF. That's the nature of SPF. It's right there in DNS for everybody to see. This is like kind of basic big game hunting, really. So in our third point, the big question, did the attacker know that all of this would subvert BIMI? Was it all just a happy accident? Some believe so. Or did the attacker have all this figured out and their interest in BIMI peaked when Gmail made that announcement in early May? And I just happened to get one of their QA samples. I mean, clearly the message itself was some kind of misfire. This is it. There's no call to action. A reply to this message wasn't going to go anywhere. Certainly wasn't going to go back to the attacker. It's just some bogus UPS email address. So the delivery of this message was not intentional. I mean, it couldn't have been. No matter what, I think very much whoever put this together knew exactly what they were doing. So that's kind of what we didn't know at the time. This was actually this three-headed monster. I filed this bug report with Google, but as it turns out, I probably should have filed 3. Now it's interesting, as if it wasn't already, I guess, but for a few days, Google just shuts BIMI off. It just turned the feature off altogether. I read that in some LinkedIn conversation folks were having about this. Whoa. Then it came back. It wasn't off for long. But now they look further back in their message headers for signs of failure, and they require DKIM, which is a really interesting detail because BIMI does not prescribe DKIM or SPF. We're getting into the weeds of email here, and so forgive me, but the standard for BIMI is just a DMARC, quarantine, or reject. You can get that with DKIM or SPF. I think at this point we know which one's the stronger standard. Other email clients don't have to do it like Google did. That's kind of an interesting point. So Google makes these changes. I don't even know personally if these changes just impact BIMI for Gmail, or if they have an impact on the way all email is handled in Gmail now. I probably will actually never know that, but I am interested to know that. UPS, of course, we've talked about their misgivings, and SPF. They made an emergency change and removed that on June 2nd. And that is a big, big change for a company like UPS to make in under 2 days. The kind of third-party dependencies that organization must have. I cannot imagine what it took for them to make that call. Microsoft, right? So here's a snippet of some Microsoft headers. We saw the message went from our virtual server infrastructure to Office. Right out of the gate, the message fails DMARC because the SPF failed. The IP address of that virtual server was not in the UPS's SPF, for their shortcomings. They had that was working right. But Office 365 continued processing the message anyway, which is weird, except it's not weird because that's exactly how Office 365 handles DMARC. You can see in here there's an action, reject, override reject. Instead of respecting DMARC, Office marks it as spam and keeps it on moving. And I found this story as a product of doing some further research for this presentation. Maybe a month ago, I find this story. This was a story from DMartian from last July, about a month after the bug discovery. Weird timing. Microsoft completely changes this behavior in Office 365, almost certainly in response to the publicity generated by this bug. That's game over. I mean, we did a whole lot of good, and at the time, I think we knew about a third of it. and the whole thing is surreal. The media part was one thing, and that's nuts. But the BIMI standards group and the IETF was this whole other thing. But infrastructure changes by 3 of the biggest brands on earth, all from that little email. Overwhelming. And so that was the Gmail bug, and that's what I call it. That's what we still call it in my household. And excuse me. Now I want to kind of stray back to karate here for a minute. These words here, this is our student creed. These are our values, the things we live by, the things that I live by. These things are swirling in my head all the time. I've probably said them 1,000 times. I see a lot of these things in myself. I see them reflected in the way that I handled the Gmail bug. The modesty part is really tough because it's a lot of, obviously you saw, it's a lot of attention. And so that has to be for a really good reason, which I think it was. I will say this, sometimes it's easier to be brave when you're fighting a big company because it doesn't have a face. But in this case, it doesn't have a face, but I know what it takes to work in a place like Google. I have a pretty good idea anyway, and that feels like enough. That's enough to scare you. That's a place where some of the smartest people on earth go to work and change the world. And I mean, that's not me. I'm not a member of that club. I'm not a genius. I'm a kid who grew up poor in a trailer park. In fact, I grew up in this trailer park. This is something I found from Google, and sure enough, there it is. That's probably in that third unit up on the left. That's where I came from. Looks pretty much the same here as it did in the 70s and 80s. I had a hard childhood. My home situation was not good, and that is an understatement, and that is a whole thing for another time. But I would end up running away from home. I will never ever forget the night that I ran for good. I had actually run a few times before that. I put on these shoes. In the middle of the night, I just ran. I ran right down the middle of the road, 5 miles in the dark. I would spend the next 2 years of high school living with friends. As I've done almost my whole life, I've just tried to model other kids who were smart and had families that were intact. And I really faked it, I think. And I faked being a smart person. And these kids were going to college, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do. So I just did what they did, and I applied to the schools that they applied to. And there was one thing I could not fake, and that was being poor. And I had to write one hell of an essay to convince somebody that I was worth taking a chance on. And I wrote it, and I didn't leave anything out. And I don't think I can ever read it again. I have it. I've been carrying that essay around in a box for about 30 years now. Gmail was a fight. And fighting seems to be something I know how to do. Persevere, I guess. And if there's one of those principles of black belt that I was born with, I think it's perseverance. It's how I got to college. I fought for myself. I told my story, and the University of New Hampshire listened to that story. They gave me an incredible aid package that basically allowed me to go to school tuition free, which allows me to be here with you today. I have a hard time talking about this because I haven't seen this acceptance letter probably since I received it in 1995. I located it for the purposes of this talk with you. It appears that I never read it carefully at the time. There's an invitation there to apply to the University Honors Program. I don't even remember that. That's how messed up that time in my life was. And that's pretty good. I think everything could stop right there, and that would be good enough. At UNH, I was given this opportunity like I never knew. In 4 years, I had a degree. I branched into computer science projects that would really be the springboard for my career. I would help author the school's very first textbook on the internet, which is pretty weird to be in a college where they're using a book with your name in it. And not because I was born some kind of expert, but because I wanted to learn. The moment I set foot on that campus, I wanted to learn. I had a used computer. I had a 1200 baud modem, and that's it. I had nothing but text-based internet, and I printed reams of paper, reams of Usenet posts, just learning everything I could about the web. We teach many, many lessons in karate. And one of those lessons is fail fast. You certainly have heard that before. At UNH, I probably failed faster than most. I started school in September. By the end of that month, I can't believe I did this. By the end of the month, I was calling the system administrator at his house on a Saturday morning, furious because my account was locked out, which it was, because it was full. It was over quota because my account was full of malware, which I had downloaded all month, wholly unaware of who wrote it and what it was doing. Wasn't doing much, but I didn't know what it could do. You know, I was learning, but by February here, after only one full semester of college, not even a full year, I'd be in front of an academic review panel facing expulsion. I've had many fights in my life, but I was in a fight to stay in school, and that's a fight that I won. I was allowed to stay in school, but I had some very Kevin Mitnick-like restrictions on not using computers for an entire semester, which was pretty consequential for somebody who was pretty deeply immersed in computer science at the time. And I figured out, I'm probably not proud to say I found a way around that, but that was a hard year. It was a hard year in a lot of ways. I went from first semester academic probation to the dean's list by junior year. I would have a job right out of school months before I even graduated. I have a million stories. I'd be on the cover of a magazine. I'd go on to do security work for the U.S. Navy, and I'd work for IBM. I'd be a cybersecurity architect for 2 hospitals. I'd be solicited to speak by NIST and the National Science Foundation. I'd serve on a White House task force on internet security. That was just like a month ago. I'd speak at a conference in New York City, headlined by Kevin Mitnick himself. And I'd go on to discover the Gmail bug. It would make world news. This whole thing is a movie. My life is a montage. But that's how I grew up, watching 80s action movies. That's all I know, that life is a series of events stitched together. And because every montage builds to some positive outcome, that's how I think of everything. You put in the work, and you get the result. And in the middle, there's all this other stuff, like taking chances and failing and getting back up. But to quote this scene from Rocky IV, in the end, you're the one standing. That's what I do. And that's sort of how I bridge this into karate. Karate's kind of the perfect thing for me. It has ideals, it takes hard work, and you fight. This is a photo from 8 years ago. This is the first photo I have in a white belt, here with my daughter, who at the time was 4. I always wanted karate to kind of change my personality and just make me better. And I don't know, in time so far it doesn't really change your personality, but it does change your work ethic. I don't know if 8 years feels like a long time. It sure feels like it when you're first starting. When your karate peer group is measuring their experience in decades, and the senior practitioner in my art has been doing this longer than I've been alive. I don't know, maybe there is still some time for my personality to mellow out. Who knows? You know, these are just words, but they're some of the first words that came to my mind when I thought about Kenpo. It's funny because the first things I thought of were not the predictable things like self-defense or strength or confidence, and I don't know, maybe those are too obvious, but karate is structure. We're tested, well, we don't like to say tested, but we're evaluated every 8 weeks. Now every 16 weeks as a black belt, and I've been in many, many tests in 8 years of time. I've never failed a test. I refuse to fail a test. I refuse to show up and not be prepared. You are accountable. No one makes you go. No one makes you put in the work. You train and test. You train and test. And that repetition makes you consistent, and there are no surprises. You put in the work, you get the result. I love that. this is goals. Goals is one of those weird words that you look at too much and then it doesn't make any sense. But we set goals, we plan them, we measure them, we adapt when the plans are not working, we achieve them, and we start the process over. And that those goals are not just karate things. These are like basic life skills. You know, your whole life is just this series of goals, and that's what you come to understand. And when you have these, I don't know, character traits, I guess, granted to you through this journey to black belt, and you have responsibility and you have work ethic, you succeed and you see opportunity. And that's what I feel like I've been able to do really my whole life, but more than ever in these last 8 years as a martial artist. That is a real gift. And so the moral, I guess, what am I trying to say? No matter where you came from, no matter who you think you are, what you're going through, that might define you in the moment. I won't discount that, but it doesn't have to define you forever. All right, those people you looked up to, that you wanted to be like, you wanted to emulate, it's extremely possible for you to become that person. You'll reach a point where you are that person. And just as karate teaches us, reflect on that, celebrate it, then set your next goal. Take control. Don't let life make plans for you. It's some more karate wisdom for you right there. So maybe 3 parting things here, born from the karate wisdom that we teach. Number 1, make plans. Make plans for yourself. Number 2, face your fears. Versus don't be afraid. I mean, everybody's afraid. Fear is a natural response to your world, but every time you face your fear, you get stronger. Accept help. That is, how do you distill that, right? Let others help you. Be teachable. Be a teachable person. Sometimes goals have tests. Actually, any goal worth having usually does have a test. Embrace tests. Prepare for them to the point where you cannot wait to take them. Okay, tests are not games of chance. I used to think that way. My academic career, no doubt. Now I realize what a huge waste of time that was. Taking chances means, taking risks. I think we saw a little of that earlier, but it also means respecting boundaries. And you have to cultivate this sense of when you're crossing a boundary, and you need to exercise some judgment. And when you're stupid, you're stupid. And short of time and experience, the only thing that helps that along is being helped, being taught, and being guided by other people. Which kind of leads to our final point, letting others help you. I wouldn't be here today without a whole series of people who are willing to help me learn about myself and who taught me how to help myself. And in time you become very, very proud of being able to support yourself, and you tend to refuse help, and that's pride, but that's kind of a tough mentality to correct, because you need to accept help or you will not grow as a person. Okay, so accept help. And so all these things, where do they come from? I don't know. You learn karate, right? I guess there is a 4th thing. Learn karate. Can't speak for all martial arts, but Kenpo is wonderful. But if that's not your thing, pursue the martial arts. There are many. but give yourself a gift of structure and accountability and strength, sure, you know, but invest in yourself as a person. And if you do that, you put yourself in a position to do, you know, anything you want, and maybe do some really interesting things in the process. Close this out with sort of my thank you tweet that I posted last year to everyone who helped sort of fuel me. And I'll just say again, I said this at the beginning of the talk, but I'm just absolutely grateful to have been given a chance to tell this story today. And in the process, I learned so much more about what happened back last summer. I learned more about myself, but only because I forced myself to sit down and accept the challenge of speaking at this conference, which means doing work. And I did the work, and now I'm on the other side of that, and I'm a better person, and that is priceless. So thank you so much for choosing to be here with me today, and I hope you take at least one positive thing away from this, and I hope you resolve to work on yourself, or keep working on yourself. You're worth it, and you always will be worth it. And we close every karate class just like this. Make a fist, cover it, bow our heads. Thank you so much.